Welcome to AGNT, the podcast for enterprise tech meets the agentic era. I'm Gemma Allen, joined by my co-host Raphaelle, broadcasting from the New York Stock Exchange. On every episode, we unpack how intelligent systems are reshaping companies, markets, and the way real work gets done. From Fortune 500 boardrooms to breakout upstarts, we're digging into the strategies, technologies, and people defining the next chapter of AI. Let's get into it. Welcome to a very special episode of AGNT. We are not on Wall Street today, we're in Times Square, New York at the MCP Dev Summit, a special guest of the Linux Foundation. Raphaelle, welcome.
Thank you.
You know, I think when I look back on my own analysis of MCP, yours were some of the first articles that I ever read. So this is really somewhat of a full circle moment for you, right?
Right.
Lots to cover today, but let's get straight into it. News of the week, the Claude Code fiasco. I don't even know how to term it yet, because I think the implications are yet to be fully known. What are your thoughts?
Well, look, I think, so first, we all saw this was April Fool's joke, right? I mean, it came out like on April 1st, though it officially was done on March 31st, but everyone had a hesitation, like, is this a joke, right? You have Anthropic, this major company that is going to IPO and that has said just last week or this week that it's going to IPO this year, and then you have this, like, I don't even know the term, like huge monster whatever leak, where like it's a completely like random leak. I mean, random, I don't know if that's a term, but of course it was not done, like it was not supposed to be done, and they unveiled, I think it was 512,000 lines of code, where basically you have a very strong view or preview, whatever is the right term, of what they are building. And what Anthropic is building is what makes the stock market shake each time. I mean, over the past 2 months, every time Anthropic releases something, the stocks drop. Anthropic releases like Cowork, it drops. The plugins, the Claude Code security. So now, like, the question everyone is asking is like, okay, what was in there that matters? I think several things. First, Anthropic is really confirming that they are building what I have termed this orchestration graph.
For sure.
They want to be the orchestrators with Claude Code as where you capture user intent. The whole orchestration system that becomes a very sophisticated, like agentic construction. And if there's one thing that I want to point out, it's how they are solving the problem of context. Context entropy, which is the problem that is, it's the name of the problem, which is as these models absorb more and more like context to actually be able to render the objectives, at one point the model performance goes down and you're not able to handle context even though the context windows have expanded. So they have apparently built in a very smart system called like the pointer, by which instead of actually having to put the information within the loop, you can go and like index the information from everywhere it is. So from the database, from the CRM, think of this as a very smart like knowledge management system. This is what the LLM becomes. It's like you have the model and you can go and fetch the information where you need it, when you need it, without it taking a lot of space in the context window. So that seems like very technical. That is like a major innovation, and if Anthropic is effectively able to do that, they completely bypass all the competition, I mean, I think it's really interesting that even though, yes, this was a huge screw up on behalf of someone at Anthropic, wow, and I would hate to be the part or parcel of that team that was responsible for that, right? Can you imagine? When people were thinking it's an April Fool's joke, I was like, Dario doesn't strike me like somebody with that type of a sense of humor, but why, right? Why?
But at the same time, so much of the conversations are around catch up, get ahead, right? It just goes to show how much impetus they have in this market. What I thought was really interesting from what we saw, we saw Capybara, we saw Tamagotchi style friends, which you can engage with, right?
Right.
It was covering so many elements of not just the enterprise stack, but also the consumer stack too. But I thought it was really interesting that a lot of it was about persistent activity in the background all the time, right? Which is in some ways similar to the OpenClaw, now NemoClaw argument, right? The idea that Anthropic can do this for you too, perhaps in a way that just, at least from a perception perspective, has more guardrails, more governance. And that's a really interesting part of this, because we all wondered about what happened with that Peter Dario conversation some months back, right? So perhaps was this in their plan all along? It's just so fascinating.
I mean, for sure that person is in a lot of trouble, and yeah, I mean, I think and of course all of the open source community went big into this. I mean, they had actually put in the features everything against distillation, so they had found a way to put poison data if you are distilling the model. So if you have open source Chinese competition that wants to distill, Anthropic has been saying that people are distilling their models, they actually put a system that was unveiled by which they would poison the data of people who would distill their system. So I mean, it's kind of unveiling that. So it's a problem. I think, to go back to your point on operating in the background, that is indeed, I would say, the second big innovation that they unveiled. I mean, that they unveiled unexpectedly, right? Which is having this agent system work in the background. Like, you leave on Friday and you arrive on Monday morning, and everything has been done for you. You have the notifications. I mean, they're really working to have these agentic colleagues, as we have used often this term, to be working for you. And I think that what they show, if you put everything together, it's not just small details. It's a very complex architectural construction by which they're going all into this agent harness, multi-agent orchestration. I mean, what we have been saying since May last year, when we said the moat of LLMs is not in technical capabilities only, it's in the orchestration. This was in May 2025. Anthropic has been going along that line every single day and building orchestration, and now it's really going into multi-agent systems running all the time. Claude Code is really the entry point, and so it has interesting implications that we can discuss in another episode on every company.
Let's quickly talk implications, though, because a lot of headlines yesterday picked up this idea that, from a governance perspective and from a kind of integrity perspective, it raised some questions, right? There was some commentary around agents being told to act like they weren't agents, right, to access certain systems, etc. And I feel like perhaps that will give them somewhat of a grit on the enterprise veneer that they've built. But overall, if you were Sam Altman yesterday, what do you think it means? Where do you think his mind went yesterday when this news broke?
I mean, what I think is that it just shows you the pace at which this is happening. I mean, imagine when they leaked, if that's the term, you have people in Asia that at 4 o'clock in the morning were building this huge GitHub repo that is the fastest growing GitHub repo in history,
Incredible.
By the way. It's people are all watching what is happening, but it's happening, we're not just talking about, they leaked one feature or two features. No, it's 512,000 lines of code with, the biggest player going to IPO. I always think about the implications in terms of capital markets. This is not just a random mom and pop shop company. This is the company that everyone is watching.
Do you expect it will in any way delay their IPO plan? Do you think they're going to have a reputational kind of overturn from this?
Look, I may be wrong on that. I think that there was no customer data that was leaked. They were the model weights and all that were not leaked. So again, it raises questions about, oh my God, how can that happen? The funny part is it actually happened through an acquisition that they did in December 2025, if I'm correct. So it's actually through something that they had bought. It's with that system that the leak happened. Again, I don't know all the technical details, but it shows. So I don't think that is going to affect the power of what they're building and the direction. For me, it's the direction that matters. It's and I think the Tamagotchi part was maybe more anecdotal, but I'm still focused on what are they building in the enterprise and why does this matter, and thinking, okay, what does this mean for Snowflake, Databricks? What does this mean for Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow? What does this mean for all these companies?
I mean, they've had an interesting run, right, from a geopolitical perspective too, and they have had a large influx of customers. So, right, subscriptions have soared for Anthropic on the back of what's happened here in the US.
Exactly.
So I think, it's an interesting time to see exactly what direction they're going. But one thing is for sure, I think Dario is a genius. And I think we can't deny how successful and how impactful this company is. The fact that this leak has, people have probably not gone to bed, right? Like, can you imagine in the dev community what's happened since? So I think it's fascinating. But let's move on for a second, because this was a crazy week, right? We talk all the time about market reaction to tech and how we live in a moment that feels like a bit of a Pied Piper moment. No one really knows what's happening. I think TurboQuant is another exceptional example of this. Okay, so this is the memory issue that happened this week, whereby Google released this report that basically demonstrated how caching can essentially be compressed, and I think Wall Street heard memory, and memory stocks just got an absolute wipeout, right? Like, it is insane. If you think about it, I heard someone describe it, it's like Google came up with a way to fit more content onto a post-it note, and filing cabinets lost like 30% of their market value. So like it's a crazy, crazy, crazy space. What are your thoughts in terms of what's happened and why these two worlds are not connecting with sensible data?
Well, so I think we need to take a step back on like memory as a whole, and the Mag 7 had a run over the past years as foundational players, of course, in the tech ecosystem. I think memory is maybe the equivalent of the Mag 7 trade for a lot of hedge funds right now. Why? Because memory in AI infrastructure is a real bottleneck. From a supply side, like, there is no more capability until 2027, maybe 2028. I mean, the delays vary, of course, according to the producers. You have 3 companies in the world, 2 in South Korea, Micron in the US, I mean, so SK Hynix, Samsung, and Micron in the US that are basically having an oligopoly on HBM, for example. SanDisk is producing NAND, so those are like the key players. And it's like a lot of hedge funds are invested in these stocks because there is this bottleneck. And Wall Street loves bottlenecks because a bottleneck, you can increase prices, and of course that's a favorable investment thesis. So when you have a technique that comes out where it's like, oh, we're going to need 6 times less memory, well, all the quants are like memory equals less demand equals problem. So of course this is not what happened, because the constraint is from a supply side. And what happened from Google, so 2 things. First, the paper was released under a research blog and points back to 3 research papers that are from 2025 and 1 from 2024. So they packaged it in the right way because they're presenting this at an upcoming AI conference in the next week. But the actual papers on TurboQuant are actually from 1 year ago. I mean, that's the first part, right? So it's not that new. It's been out there for a year. Okay. Second, this concerns only like inference efficiency, and we go back here to the long context that we were talking about with the Cloud leak. It's like long context is key, and being able to solve the memory constraints around how like long context is able to be done cheaply, quickly, efficiently is a key problem that Google is solving. So everything was mixed up between like the memory for the model weights, the memory for the KV cache indeed. And I just think that this is a very interesting architectural innovation that is going to actually accelerate the need for memory, and that anyways, everything is accelerating this inference economy that we have mentioned many times. So I think it's a net positive. And of course, like, you cannot put all of the eggs in the same bag and just confound everything.
Do you think that, like, at a hedge fund level, I'm interested to know your perspective on this. I'm sure there's people who are extremely informed, right? But broadly, as these narratives play out and they have market impacts, do you think people understand, like, model weights, KV cache, neural mesh networks, all of that stuff? Like, do you think that because memory, okay, is a very large space,
Right.
It is a very important space. It has had huge growth if you think about what it does now in the inference era of AI
Exactly.
versus the training model of AI, era of AI, versus what it did like 20 years ago, right? People just imagined hard drives, okay? Like the technicalities of this are huge. Do you think that people are translating those technicalities into facts? Where is the mismatch of understanding happening? That's what I would really love your perspective on.
Well, to some extent, that's what I'm doing, and this is what I invest behind. My conviction is that architectural resilience, and so when I say architectural resilience, it's what is happening in the AI stack and how are you positioned, like as a memory company, as a GPU company, as an application company, like how are you positioned versus an innovation, and what does that mean? What is really complex is this is super, super technical, yes, and this is happening so fast. I mean, again, just go back to the Claude leak. Like this happened like 2 days ago. Here we are talking about that. There's like billions at stake everywhere. Like we're just starting to process that, and it happens every single day, several times per day. So I think in this new paradigm of AI, agentic AI, that I think no one is questioning anymore. I mean, there are problems with how it is built out, like the power constraints, the cost of this huge build out. So it's full of question marks for sure. But I think the progress, what is being done, what Anthropic is doing, no one is questioning that anymore, hopefully. And so the investment paradigm is changing, and we're living through that right now. Like, I mean, that has been my fundamental conviction over the past 2 years, and it's complex, but it's fascinating.
And lastly, because I know I really want to move on to OpenAI, who is responsible to do a better job, do you think, at messaging these product roadmaps and impacts? Like, do you think that now, in this era, technology companies need to change their messaging strategy? Do you think there needs to be a major overhaul in terms of how the markets translate what they're actually trying to portray? Like, because my feeling is something needs to give, you know?
I think Wall Street, very rightly so, believes in the numbers. I think you need to have a coherent strategy. You need to have the numbers that can be operational and financial. Like, I mean, the financial reality takes several quarters to actually translate, but there's a way of showing what road you are on with the right operation KPIs. I mean, you need to show, again, the road you are on, the financial impacts on revenue, on margins, on CapEx is never immediate, supposedly. So I don't think it's that they need to change the narrative. They need to show like data points that investors can check, can believe, can benchmark, because this is this is a rational work, right? So I don't think it's more of a better narrative. It's more explaining what you do and giving the proof.
Sure. Okay. Speaking of messaging and masters of messaging, let's move to Sam Altman and OpenAI. And I don't know how you could even put a phrase on their valuation, right? Their 35x revenue valuation this week. I mean, gearing up for an IPO. Interesting time for that company too, though, if we look at it in perspective, right? They had a pullback of Sora this week too, based on that, mishap, I guess you could call it, with Disney. They have also had some question marks over some of their behaviors, broadly from the perspective of customer loyalty, etc. When we think about the Anthropic, Dario, Department of Defense debacle, right? So I feel like it's a company kind of at an interesting point, but the valuation is, it's astronomical. What are your thoughts? Like, do you think it's warranted? Like, where's your head at when you see these numbers?
So I would say, first, from a coding perspective, like their coding model is actually delivering outstanding performance. So I must give that point to OpenAI. There has been in the past weeks, you see the pace of change, there has been a change in how their solution is actually, in many cases, actually preferred to Claude Code. This is very new. Now this leak could completely rechange the picture once again, but we've seen like literally in the last not months, weeks, a change. So I think OpenAI is very clear that they are now hopefully starting to focus on how do we make money? Like, how do we monetize our technology? No one is contesting the technology. No one has ever contested the actual technology, but how do we make money? So indeed, Sora, all of those like adventures, if we can call them like that, that is not where you find the most like efficiency. That's costing a lot of compute, and that is maybe not the priority, if I may. What is the priority? How do you get this whole agentic AI thing on the ground through like coding, through the enterprise, etc. So I think they're starting to go in that direction, and they've recently said that they were shifting even their sales efforts. They're going all in into the enterprise, and that's been like a massive move. Again,
there has also been speculation about an ad model, though, right? We saw the Super Bowl ads this year. I know they haven't actually publicly really confirmed or denied that, but they haven't denied it either, right? And that would be a very different. I mean, if you think about it, then we're 10 years back again from the perspective of building a very proprietary data moat, like a meta model, all over again, right? Versus, an enterprise model where it's completely vertically integrated. Do you think you can hang your hat on both at the same time? Like, do you think that's a possibility for them?
I mean, that's what they're doing for sure. I mean, they have a consumer play. I personally don't think that is where they have a moat. They have a play, so they can go on that direction. I mean, it's what they've been doing with ChatGPT, obviously. I personally don't think that there's a moat, that the moat is in the enterprise and in orchestration. They need to focus. I mean, when you're burning that level of cash, you need to focus. So you can maybe play 2 or 3 different things, not 10. So they're starting to realize that. I mean, the round was very difficult to raise. Like, it was not an easy round to raise.
I actually did not know that.
Oh, it was a super difficult round to raise. Like, and I mean, I think investors know this in the background. Like, yeah, there's been like a lot of jokes of how you could very easily access the round if you wanted to. And yeah, there's been a lot of jokes going in the background.
Do you think that there's a perception now they're on a complete moonshot? Like, do you think that is the broad perception of OpenAI in terms of like, the money, what they're looking for in terms of the cash that they're hemorrhaging?
What I think is that we need to think about the impact that XAI, Anthropic, and OpenAI, with their cumulative value, what they are going to represent for the IPO markets in the next months, not in the next years. I think that we need to imagine that a lot of these funds are going to be indexed. There's a big debate around that Americans and retirements are going to be having OpenAI, Anthropic, XAI shares, and I think that's the bigger question that needs to be asked, because if you have a model that is not clear and that is burning that much cash, maybe a regular American doesn't want that in his retirement account. Well, and we're starting to see a lot of questions around that, which I think are the right questions, because those 3 companies, given the size of their IPO, it's going to be very, very major.
Let's finish with one quick comment. I want to ask you about one quick thing. An interesting thing I did notice from this raise is that there was a number of private investors to ARC, right? To ARC Capital, which are, I guess they're probably very, very wealthy individuals, but they're not institutional investors. What are your thoughts on that? Like, does that signal anything to you? And do you think to people listening, you're thinking, wow, are we going to see more and more of that? Are we going to see more of a kind of almost the retail investment thesis encroaching into the space because these company valuations are so huge? Is the opportunity more democratized? Like, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's very dangerous. I think this is exactly the point. I mean, look, I love AI, I obsess on AI, that's what I do all day long. I think those are, like, if you take Anthropic, OpenAI, like XAI, like Minimax, DeepSeek, those are, and I keep repeating this, completely different animals with completely different readings of where is their mode, what does their P&L look like. Like Minimax, DeepSeek, and OpenAI are 3 very different species. So I think that it's already complex when you're doing that every day, every minute, and literally obsessing over this, that when you're a regular American, it's not possible to have the right information. So those companies are generational companies. I agree. I mean, Anthropic for me could be the next Google or the equivalent. I mean, and I've been sharing these stakes a lot now. I think that it's important to have access, yes, but we're going to have to control this really in the right way, because it's not just like, oh, let's all go to Disneyland and this is super cool. No, this is not it. This is a very risky, still money-losing business with a lot of like hard constraints, like power, capital, like hyperscalers, like spending 4 trillion till 2030. If you look at the latest numbers, this is a dangerous game. Very attractive, yes, very dangerous. So we should not be playing with the matches, if that's the expression, right?
Okay, well listen, Raphaelle, I know you have to go. We have a very busy day behind us here. This room is filling up with lots of very techy enthusiasts, right? Like the best and the brightest geeks of tech are here, I think, today. So excited to talk to some of those folks. Thanks so much for coming on. I'm sure in 2 more weeks, I know you're going to France. You'll be back with us in 2 weeks. God knows what will have happened between now and then, but always love chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching AGNT. Tune in next time.